welcome. Happy Women's Health Week. Welcome to Kindbody. We'll be starting shortly. You're just waiting for everyone to arrive, but we're so happy that you're here.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're going to kick off in just a few minutes. I am Rebecca, the Director of Marketing at Kindbody. I'm logged in as Kindbody, and I'll be your host for the event tonight. And we have Dr. Fahimeh Sasan, the founding physician of Kindbody, who will be our speaker. We also have a few helpers here from Kindbody. We have Erica Keller over there in San Francisco. We have Emmy Gavioli in San Francisco, who can wave. Ariel Mortimer in New York. And they're going to be helping out in the chat to make sure everyone's questions get answered. So we're going to have Dr. Sasan go through this presentation, and we encourage you all to ask any questions you have in the chat. You can either share your questions with the whole group, or you can send them to the Kindbody team privately. We will make sure to get everyone's questions answered either during the event or at the end. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Dr. Sasan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Fahimeh Sasan. I'm a board-certified OBGYN and also the founding physician of Kindbody. On behalf of myself and our team, I welcome you. Many people don't know, but this week is Women's Health Week, and so I'm thrilled to be here with you guys tonight. Thank you for sharing your evening. I know we're all living in unprecedented times right now, and so I hope that this gives you a moment to pause to think about your well-being and your women's health, and hopefully you learn something. I hope this information is empowering, and we're here to kind of help you through every step of the way. Just to kind of give you some background, Kindbody is a national network of women's health practices. We came together as a group of women who are experts in this field, both in fertility and general OBGYN, with really a core mission to provide care that we as women would want to receive ourselves. And I'm really passionate about improving access to women's health for women, because I recognize that this is an area where a lot of us lack just general information about. And also, it's easy to kind of step aside and be like, okay, I'll take care of it next year, or I'll think about that later. And so I hope tonight gives us a moment to really put ourselves first and know that we are here for all women, and our goal is to really help us be the healthiest version of ourselves. So what do we do? Kindbody does the entire spectrum of gynecologic care. So you can come to Kindbody both in New York, Santa Monica, and in San Francisco, and soon in Princeton, New Jersey, and also coming in the fall in Century City and Los Angeles. But we provide the entire spectrum of gynecologic care. So whether that's a well-woman checkup, or IUD, or you have an abnormal pap smear, or a yeast infection, or you want to talk about birth control, so the entire gamut of anything gynecologic. We also take care of all aspects of fertility. So maybe you were just interested in learning more about your body. Maybe you are anticipating to start trying soon. Maybe you've already been trying for a while and have suffered some miscarriages or having difficulty getting pregnant. Or you're interested in preserving your fertility for the future in the form of egg freezing, or you need fertility treatments with IVF or IUI. We do the entire gamut of fertility care. And then we recognize so important that we can't just take care of a woman by taking care of her uterus and ovaries, and that all of this becomes so important to think about wellness and nutrition, and then also to know that, you know, family isn't always cookie cutter. And we provide the entire array of LGBTQ services, whether that's donors and surrogates. And so we're really here to help you from beginning to end, and really want to provide it all comprehensively under the same roof. As you all know, we are living in strange times with this coronavirus. I know it has impacted every single one of us. One of the biggest impacts is we usually do this type of conference in person. So the fact that we're doing it through this virtual world obviously is evident of the changes that have occurred in our society. And as many things are closed and we're not able to travel and we're not able to go to restaurants and bars and have parties and, just go to work, even the actual physical aspect of going to work. And we know so many people are affected both economically, medically, and socially. We want you to know that reproductive health is essential. So whether you are just due for your annual checkup or you're dealing with pregnancy loss or an unwanted pregnancy or unexpected pregnancy or birth control, or you're having an issue, that care is absolutely essential. Our clinics are open. We've been open the entire time. And we think it's now more important than ever for you to have access. So whatever you need, we are open. You can go to our website at kindbody.com and make appointments. We're open Monday through Saturday on both coasts, and would be thrilled to see you. The most important message, if you take nothing more from this webinar today, is don't be afraid to ask questions. I can say this as an OB/GYN. I often have woman checkups with women. I feel like sometimes people are just going through the motions. They're kind of nervous about being there, and so they'll just answer the questions that I ask, but never really ask many questions. And so I really hope that I can, if I instill nothing more upon you in this conversation, is to not be afraid to ask questions. No question is too small. No question is silly. If there's something on your mind, voice it. The worst that could happen is you get your question answered. And so I really hope that all of us feel our voices need to be heard, and to never go to a doctor, whether it's for your women's health or your dentist or any doctor, and leave without having your questions answered. I think that's so vitally important. All right, so when it comes to our health and well-being, it's really important for us to understand that as women, it's not just a pap smear. That's, oftentimes people will tell me, oh yeah, well, I've gotten my pap smear, so I'm perfectly fine. And a pap smear is just cervical cancer screening. And there's so many other aspects that we as women need to be aware of. And so over the next few minutes, I'm just going to go over some of the really important things that affect women in particular when it comes to our health, that we all need to really be cognizant about and make sure we're taking care of ourselves. So what is a well woman exam? A well woman exam would be something that you should have once a year, regardless of how old you are. And it would include a clinical breast exam. That's when the doctor actually physically feels your breast. And what we're looking for are any lumps or bumps or masses or tenderness or discharge that might be abnormal. We do a physical exam. We want to check your thyroid, really important for women's health. We want to make sure, do you have a new mole that you didn't have before? Really just doing a complete physical, listening to your heart and lungs, just generally doing an evaluation. And then a really thorough pelvic exam and checking your ovaries, checking your uterus, checking the cervix. So pap smear, a lot of us know the name, but maybe don't know exactly what it is. A pap smear is cervical cancer screening. That is all it is. It doesn't tell us anything more about you, but it is vitally important. Cervical cancer is a very common cancer in women. It is caused by HPV. HPV stands for human papillomavirus. Up to 80% of women will be exposed to and test positive for HPV at some point in their life. So it's really important that we start that testing at the age of 21, regardless of sexual activity. So even if you have never been sexually active, you should start having pap smears at the age of 21. And then if your pap smears are normal and you've never had HPV, then it's okay to do pap smears every 3 years. If you have had a history of abnormal pap smear or HPV, then you should have it every year, unless the doctor tells you you need it more often. But the key is that a lot of women say, oh, okay, I don't need a pap smear for 3 years, so then they don't do their well woman checkup. And what I want to stress is, even if your doctor has correctly told you you don't need a pap smear for another 3 years, to know that you're actually supposed to have a well woman checkup once a year. And you may not need a pap smear during that visit, but it's still important to have that clinical breast exam, that physical exam, and to go over some of the other aspects of your general health that we're going to talk about in a few moments. All right. So preconception assessment is another part of what should happen in a well woman checkup. So I really implore you and stress that all women should actually see a doctor before you get pregnant. What happens, unfortunately, most of the time is the first time I'm meeting a woman is when they're already pregnant. But what I really want and wish to happen is that I would see you before you got pregnant. And why? Because I want to go over your medical history, your surgical history, the medications you're taking, your family history, so that we can be really perfectly prepared for that pregnancy, so that we can dot all our I's, cross all our T's, make sure you're on the right vitamins, make sure we make any adjustments we need to make on your other medications, or if you do have certain medical issues or you've had prior surgeries, that we can make sure your health is perfect before you embark on a pregnancy. Because at the end of the day, it's important for us women to realize, even though women have been having babies since the beginning of time, pregnancy is still a stress to our body. So we want to make sure everything is perfect or as good as can be before we embark on pregnancy. So that's why it's so vitally important to see a doctor before you start trying, so that these things can be addressed. So just to kind of go over briefly, when you do tell a doctor, hey, I plan on getting pregnant in the next 6 months or in the next 6 to 12 months, there's some blood work that needs to be done. We want to check your thyroid hormone. Thyroid hormone is so vitally important that a woman who has hypothyroidism or low thyroid or underactive thyroid, that can actually lead to birth defects and mental retardation for the baby. That's why it's so important for us to check it and make sure it's normal before you get pregnant. Another thing that's important is anemia. All pregnant women will develop some level of anemia during pregnancy, so we want to make sure we're starting at a good place. So if it turns out you're a little bit anemic or your iron levels are low, we can boost you with vitamins before the pregnancy so that you start the pregnancy on your best foot. Vitamin D levels can affect pregnancy. Obviously, STD screening is really important, and I tell women you should have STD screening even if you've been with the same partner for 10 years. We just want to start with a clean slate. Immunity to rubella and chickenpox and measles is really important. These in the adults can lose immunity as we get older. So we want to make sure you're immune before you embark on pregnancy. Otherwise, we can get you vaccinated before you get pregnant. Knowing your blood type is really important. And then genetic carrier screening is a way to screen for genetic diseases to see if you and your partner are carriers. And the way it works is we can screen for up to 283 diseases to see if a woman and a man are carriers for the same disease. In the event that you and your partner are a perfect match for the same disease, then there could be a chance of passing that on. Take-home message for all of these tests are these are all things we want to check and address before you're pregnant. Because once you're pregnant, there's very little we can do. So getting it all checked and making sure it's all perfect before we embark on pregnancy is the way to go, and it can easily be done with just some simple blood tests. So what other factors impact fertility? You know, I wish it was just about your uterus and ovaries and vagina, but if we isolate and only take care of those parts, then we as doctors have colossally failed you. And it's so important to think about diet, lifestyle, family history, and mental health, because again, all of our bodies are connected and every aspect of our health impacts another part of our organ systems. So it's so important to know that these are all things that are vitally impact our ability to get pregnant and stay pregnant. So diet and lifestyle, don't smoke. You know, it's 2020. I hope there are very few of you that are still smoking out there, but if you are, let me tell you that there's one thing that scientifically we have shown harms the fertility of both men and women, and that's cigarette smoking. More than any other factor that we've proven reduces the count of eggs and sperm. So if you needed another reason to not smoke, here's one. And so don't smoke cigarettes, and then stay active and maintain a well-balanced diet. It's so important for us to realize that, you know, we all live in these crazy lives, and, you know, even with this coronavirus, hopefully it's given us some time to take pause and think about some of the more important things in our lives, but we all lead these crazy lives where we're not getting the appropriate nutrition, we're not getting the appropriate exercise. So really, you know, taking a step back and looking at your diet, do I get enough calcium? Do I get all the food groups? Am I getting, you know, the nutrients I really need? Am I getting enough protein? Are so vitally important. And then really important to realize that being underweight is just as unhealthy as being overweight. And so if you've had a hard time working on it alone, know that there's nutritionists and dietitians that can help you. And we actually have nutritionists that you can get connected with virtually directly through our website. So go to kindbody.com and you can make an appointment literally tonight from the comfort of your own home with a nutritionist that can help you kind of lay out, here's some good foods to eat. And this is regardless of whether you're planning a pregnancy today or in another 10 years. It's never too early to become healthy. Other factors, family history plays a really important role. You know that your mom went into menopause. Menopause, by definition, is she naturally stopped getting her period for a year. And if your mom happened to be less than 45 when that occurred, you're at risk for early menopause. And so that can then impact your ability to have children and your bone health. So there's a lot of aspects that can affect. So next time you're with your mom, ask her, how old were you when through menopause? That's a really important factor to know. One important thing is a lot of women will tell me, oh, my mom had me when she was 40, or my grandmother had my aunt when she was 42, so I'm going to be fine. And I really want to end that misconception tonight. There is no correlation between how old your mom was or grandmother was when they had you or your aunt and how old you will be when you can have children. Because there's so many confounding factors in this equation that we can't just assume we're going to be super fertile because our mom was super fertile. Mental health, I can't stress that enough. It's Women's Health Week, and I would be doing you a huge disservice if I didn't spend a few moments talking about mental health. Our mental health is so important for every aspect of our well-being, from just being, getting up out of bed and doing our work, whether it's still in our pajamas or actually getting dressed, to our general health, our energy levels, and then our fertility as well, our ability to become moms and to breastfeed and to carry pregnancies to term are all so vitally impacted by mental health. And so I really encourage, every woman to take a moment right now as we're going through this stressful times and take a survey of your own mental health. It never hurts to meet with a therapist, even if it's a one-time appointment, to kind of talk about your fears, talk about your struggles. We have counselors and therapists through our website that, again, you can schedule appointments with virtually. You don't even have to leave your home. But if you exclude your mental health from your well-being, it's really incongruent. It can't come together. And so it's so important to do that. And so I really want to highlight this and encourage all of you to really take care of your headspace as much as you take care of every other aspect of your body. Heart disease. So we've spent a few moments talking about, some general women's things, and heart disease is the leading cause of death for women in the United States. 1 out of every 5 female deaths or women who die are linked to heart disease. I hope you're astonished by this, and it's the truth, and it's something that doesn't get talked about. So important when you have your checkups to know your blood pressure, to know your cholesterol levels, to be screened for diabetes, to not smoke cigarettes, to know that obesity and being overweight are risk factors for heart disease, that excessive alcohol drinking is really bad for us, and that moderation in that realm is so important, and that physical inactivity. All of these are risk factors for heart disease, and you don't have to have every single one to end up having heart problems. It could be just 1 or 2 of them that lead to significant heart disease. And I think a lot of them are things that, like, how many of us here tonight know the last time we had our cholesterol checked? And how many of us maybe have been drinking a little too much or more than we usually do because of all the stresses we're facing? Or how many of us, because our gyms are closed and we're not going to work, have been more inactive than we usually have been? So it's really important for us as women especially to realize that if this is the #1 leading cause of death in the United States, that we take it seriously and take a moment to talk to your doctor and your OBGYN, and when you come see us, about this really important factor. Other thing that's really important is obviously breast cancer. 1 out of 8 women in the United States, or 12% of women, will develop breast cancer over the course of a lifetime. That's staggering. That's a lot. And you don't necessarily have to have a family history. And so I'm going to go over with you, as with any cancer, there's risk factors that we can change, and there's risk factors that we cannot change. So the things we can't change, obviously it'll just be important for us to be aware of them. And the things we can change, let's all come together and say, from tonight, I'm going to make these changes because I don't want to be one of these women in this statistic. So breast cancer, risk factors that you can't change: age. We know that as women get older, the risk of breast cancer increases. Your reproductive history. So the earlier you started getting your period, so if you were younger when you started your period and you're older when you go into menopause, so the longer the period of time is that you're getting your periods, which means your body's exposed to hormones, the bigger the chance of breast cancer. The density of your breasts, a lot of you may have heard when the doctor does your exam, oh, your breasts are really dense, or and that means that there's a lot more connective tissue, and that can increase the chances of having a cancer. Family history is a huge factor. So if you have either your mom or your grandmother or an aunt that had breast cancer, those are first-degree relatives, really important to know. And then if you do have one or more of women in your family, and particularly if you have a man in your family who had breast cancer, it's really important to know that there's genetic testing that can be done to see if you're at increased risk. So next time you go to the doctor, or hopefully when you come and see us, we're going to take a few moments to really talk about your family history and see if there's anything that's going to trigger a need for genetic testing. Factors that we can change. Now this is something we have control over: physical activity. So the less active you are, and again, these are a lot of things that are linked. The less active you are, the more likely it is that you're going to be overweight. That puts you at risk for breast cancer as well as heart disease. So being physically active is important. Health after menopause. So, many of us in this group tonight are premenopausal. We're still in our reproductive age, but recognizing that that a lot of women, once they reach menopause and go beyond, become more overweight and become more inactive. So it's all linked. That it's so important to continue that activity throughout our life, even when we're in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. Our reproductive choices make a factor. So not breastfeeding has been shown to correlate to an increased risk of breast cancer. Never having children, so a woman who goes through her whole reproductive life never having been pregnant has an increased risk of breast cancer, and getting pregnant later in life increases chances. Now, I know some of this we don't fully have control over, but at least knowing that that increases your risk should then prompt you to be more diligent about getting your mammogram and breast exams. And then excessive alcohol drinking, and there's a lot of reasons why that's not good, but there's actually been studies to show that excessive alcohol drinking can increase the risk of breast cancer. Let's talk about fertility now. So we'll change gears a little bit. Why is fertility so important? Why am I so passionate about this topic? And this is one of the main reasons why I'm so excited to be a founding physician of Kindbody is that, unfortunately, when it comes to fertility, we as women, and you could be a PhD, a physician yourself, really high caliber CEO of a company, very well educated, and unfortunately, many of us know very little about fertility. And the reason for that is, when would we have learned it, right? When we think about back in school, maybe you had middle school sex education, or maybe you were even a biology major or a science major. And even in those situations, we learn how not to get pregnant, and we learn about how to prevent STDs. But we don't actually learn about female fertility and our biological clocks. And so when we're ready to get pregnant, we're like, where do I begin? And so this next few minutes are going to be devoted to teaching you a little bit about just our general reproductive life and some things that we can do to be proactive about our fertility options. So what we should know when it comes to our reproductive health, the most important thing is our age. And I know it's like, oh, I wish that wasn't the case, but it truly is. And the reason for that is women's egg count and quality declines with age. Age is the most important predictor when it comes to a woman's fertility. And why is that? Well, let's start from the beginning. So as women, we're born with about 2 million eggs. So at birth, we're born with all the eggs we'll ever have. There's no science, there's no medicine, there's nothing in the world that could make you have more eggs. So we're born with about 2 million eggs at birth. And by the time we reach our first period, so think back, you were probably 9, 10, 11, 12. First period, we're down to 300 to 400,000 eggs. And then from there, from our very first period, each month we lose up to 1,000 eggs. And I hope your jaws are dropping at these numbers. And they're really unfair, I think so, but it's the reality. So all women, regardless of how active you are, regardless of how good or well you take care of yourself, regardless of your perfect lifestyle, every woman will reach a point where we have 0 eggs. So it becomes fundamentally important for us to empower ourselves with the knowledge of, okay, where am I at today? How many eggs do I have now? Because then that way we can make logical, objective decisions about our future. So let's talk about age, right? There's a lot of numbers that go out there. Sometimes we find women who are like 30 is the cutoff. If I don't have my kids by the time I'm 30, I'm doomed. Then some women know it's 35. So typically we point to 35, but what I want to stress is it's not like your fertility is perfect, and then you turn 35 and on your 35th birthday you jump off a cliff. It's our fertility is declining from the moment we're born. And then by the time we reach 35, the majority of women will start having a decline in their egg count and their egg quality. And the reason for that is we're born with all the eggs we'll ever have, and they steadily decline as we get older. But the sad truth is 1 out of 10 women will experience a premature drop in their egg count, meaning a premature ovarian failure prior to the age of 35. So you can't just assume because you're young that your fertility is perfect. And you can't just assume, oh, I'm 33, I still have 2 more years, I don't have anything to worry about. And you shouldn't just assume that because you're 38 that your fertility is horrible. There's always going to be exceptions to the rule, and it's a steady decline, and everyone's decline is a little bit different. And egg quality and quantity are the key factors for us to realize. So our egg count, which is the number of eggs, declines with age. And since we're born with all the eggs we'll ever have, as we age, our eggs are aging with us. So think about it, your skin, your hair, your body, your muscle mass, none of it looks the same as it did the day you were born. And you look different when you're in your 20s as you do when you're in your 30s. And all of that is a direct correlation of our age, and our egg count and quality declines with age. So it becomes really important, and I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer, but to realize that being cognizant of your age and how old you are and how many kids you want to have becomes really important for us to be honest with ourselves and then to get the truth about it so that we make the right decisions and so that we're proactive about our fertility. So what's the take-home message? You're never too young and never too old to learn more about your body, to learn more about how it works, to know your facts about how many eggs you have, about your ovarian reserve. And the reason for that is regardless of how old you are, you can find out the facts and then take some preventative measures and be proactive. And the reason why I stress being proactive is when we think about this, any other aspect of our health is all about preventative care, right? We go to the dentist, hopefully every 6 months, we go to the eye doctor, we go and get checkups, we try to eat well, we try to exercise, all in a hopes of preventing disease, right? We don't want to have a heart attack, we don't want to become obese, we don't want to get diabetes. But when it comes to our fertility, we kind of cross our fingers and hope for the best. And that's what I want to change. I want women to say, okay, I aspire to have 2 kids someday. I'm not ready to have it now, but I aspire for that. And say, okay, what can I do to maximize my chances of having those children that I want to have, regardless of how old I am? So no conversation about fertility would be complete unless we talked about, well, when am I most fertile, right? And that's, again, goes back to what I started off with. We spend our entire lives desperately trying to not get pregnant. So when the time comes where we actually want to be pregnant, we're like, how does this work? And so the way that it works is we're most fertile for 5 days of the month, 72 hours. That's it. The rest of the time, we are not fertile. So if you look at this calendar here for May of 2020, the red dot represents the first day of your period. And your most fertile days would be days 10 through 14. So the most fertile days would be kind of the tan looking circles through the yellow circle are our most fertile days. Why? Because we ovulate typically around, let's say, the 14th day, and up to 5 days prior, you're fertile. And why is that? It's because sperm can live in our ovaries and uterus for up to 72 hours. So in this scenario, or in this example, let's say you had sex on Sunday and you ovulated on Thursday, you could still get pregnant. So how can we use this information? Well, we can certainly use it if we're trying to get pregnant. These would be the ideal times to have sex. But we can also use it if we're trying to avoid pregnancy. And this is how people who use the rhythm method would go. The key with this is you have to have a regular cycle in order for this to be dependable. And what do I mean by a regular cycle? You have to have a steady pattern. So you consistently get your period every 28 days, you consistently get your period every 40 days, whatever your number is, it's consistent, then you can use this as a gauge to when am I most fertile. But if your periods are sporadic, you sometimes get it 28 days, you sometimes get it 40 days, you would not be able to use this as a predictive tool. So how does ovulation work? Well, each month, our body says, all right, I was born with all the eggs I ever had, right? So you're born with all the eggs you'll ever have. But each month, our body recruits a group of eggs, so a subset of the eggs that we were born with, and enters those eggs into the maturing process. And so sometimes it's 5 eggs reach that process, sometimes it's 30 eggs reach that process. But one of those eggs gets a signal from hormones from our brain to become fully mature. And that fully mature egg is the egg that ovulates. And that fully mature egg is the only egg in your entire body of the hundreds and thousands that you have that would have the potential of being fertilized with sperm and creating a pregnancy. So when we talk about ovulation, it's one mature egg that gets released each month in a woman who has a regular menstrual cycle. So at the end of the day, what's the key? There's no magic formula. Everyone is different. And the only way that we can really learn, well, how fertile am I? How likely is it that I could get pregnant today? Or how likely is it that I could get pregnant in 10 years? Comes down to actually doing an assessment and learning how fertile you are, what is your egg count, what is your ovarian reserve, and where do you personally stand. So how do you do a fertility assessment? Well, at Kindbody, we do, as I mentioned at the beginning, we do regular GYN services, so you can come for just your pap smear regular checkups. But let's say you're thinking about getting pregnant in the next year, or maybe you want to get pregnant again in 10 years, you can do what's called a fertility assessment. So what is that? We do a one-on-one consultation. This can be virtual for our new times of coronavirus or in the clinic. You meet with a doctor one-on-one. We go over your medical history, surgical history, medications you're taking, really do a really thorough background of your family history. How old was your mom when she stopped getting her periods, cancer history, etc. We do an ultrasound to see how many eggs your body recruited that month, which gives us an idea of how fertile you are. And we do a blood test where we check a specific hormone called anti-Müllerian hormone that gives us an idea of how many eggs do you have left from that 2 million you were born with. And it's the combination of this vaginal ultrasound and this blood test that would then objectively allow me to tell you, okay, Jane Doe, this is how fertile you are. And you just told me you don't want to have kids for another 5 years. So based on these factors, you should freeze eggs. Or, okay, Mrs. X, your fertility is great and you and your partner are deciding to start trying this summer. I think you're good. You don't have anything to worry about. Or, listen, I know you wanted to have 3 kids, but your fertility is really low, and here's some proactive measures we can take to help you achieve that and really go over your options. So that's where the fertility assessment becomes really important, because then we can actually personalize your options and your care as opposed to our traditional system right now, which is crossing our fingers and hoping for the best. So what do we learn from our results? First and foremost, at Kindbody, one of our big missions is to give you results that you can actually understand. I know we have all been, myself included, to the doctor, and you get your results back and you're like, what do these mean? there's like a jumble of numbers and you have no idea what it actually means. So when you get your results through our patient portal, you'll have your results and then a really nice description of what it actually means, obviously combined with the access to your doctor to actually go over them. But, you know, sometimes you just want to look at it in the middle of the night or show it to your best friend or show it to your partner, and you want them to be able to intuitively understand. That's what we're really, really passionate about. And so we have access to your results and get an idea of your egg count, okay? Take-home message is you have options. So let's say you are a woman who really is not ready to have a baby. Maybe you're focusing on your career, maybe you're waiting to meet the right person, maybe it's financial reasons, maybe it's Corona. Whatever the case may be, you're not quite ready to embark on motherhood today, but it's something that you really feel passionate about for the future. We can optimize your chances of having that ideal family through egg freezing. Or maybe you are in a committed relationship and you and your partner have together decided you're not ready to have kids yet. Then maybe embryo freezing is a good option for you as a couple. Or maybe you're a couple who's already been struggling with fertility. You've been trying for a long time and you keep saying, okay, I'm going to go to the doctor tomorrow. And now a year becomes 2 years and 2 years becomes 3 years and you still haven't had a pregnancy. Or maybe you're struggling with miscarriages. Maybe you've already had some fertility treatments that have failed. That's where then talking to you about your options, whether that's intrauterine insemination or IVF, become important. Take-home message is every woman has options, regardless of how old you are. And I know this topic can be so scary for so many of us, but I really want to embark upon you how important it is, regardless of how scary this topic might be, to at least know your options. It doesn't mean you have to do anything today, and maybe you just need some time, but at least learn your options today so that you know at least what choices you have, and then we can take it one step at a time, and when you're ready, you know, take some action. So what is egg freezing? Just briefly, so egg freezing is a process by which we say, okay, your fertility right now, let's say, is good, or your fertility right now is poor, but you're not ready to have a baby yet. So we're like, okay, wherever we're at right now is our baseline. I know it's going to get worse. So I want to be opportunistic. I want to take advantage of whatever fertility I have now. And I want to save these eggs to use in the future. Because I'm not quite ready to have a baby now. Or I'm planning on having a baby now, but I aspire to have 3 kids. And I'm thinking about baby number 3. So egg freezing is literally like pressing pause. It's saying, I know my body loses up to 1,000 eggs a month. I want to just take a couple dozen of them and save them to use in the future. Who should consider egg freezing? Well, before you think about egg freezing, let's just think about our life, right? So some basic questions that I encourage all of you guys to ask to yourself tonight as a little bit of homework. And if you have a partner, answer them alone before you share your answers with your partner. First question is really simple. How old are you? Be honest. Second question is, how many kids are in your ideal family? And again, be honest. If you really, in your heart of hearts, wish you had 3 kids, then it's 3 kids. Or maybe your answer is 0. I don't want any kids. That's fine. Own it. But really think about how many kids you ideally would like to have. And then, really hard question, how old will you realistically be when you have baby number 1? And then, maybe even harder, how old will you realistically be when you have your last child if you desire more than 1? And the reason is we often think about baby number 1, but we forget about our last kid. But if you think about it, pregnancy is 10 months, that's almost a year. And the medical recommendation is to wait 1 year from the birth of a child to the start of the next pregnancy. So altogether, the bare minimum is 2 years between pregnancies. And if you talk to anyone who has a child, I'll raise my hand, most women aren't ready to have another baby when they have a 12-month-old. So usually ends up being even further spacing. So really knowing how many kids you want and how old you're going to be when you have them becomes vitally important. Because if it's going to be, you're going to be older than 35 when you have either your first or last kid, then you should seriously consider egg freezing. So how does it work? As I mentioned to you, our body recruits a group of eggs each month. All we're doing with egg freezing is saying, I know you have a group of eggs. I know this group of eggs are going to be lost at the end of the month. So let's help these eggs become mature so we can extract them and save them. That's all we're doing. We're just helping a group of eggs become mature. We're not making new eggs. We're not making more eggs. We're not somehow altering the quality of the eggs. We're just helping your eggs become mature. How does it work? It works through a series of just 10 days of injections. That's one of the most common misconceptions, is that egg freezing is a process that takes months. It's literally 14 days, typically about 10 days of injections, and we monitor your progress through those 10 days. And all we're doing is seeing how your eggs are maturing over that 10 days. And I know as soon as I talk about injections, half of you just close your eyes and are like, oh God. But the injections are teeny tiny. We teach you how to do them. On the screen actually is one of our amazing physician assistants, Hina, where we have videos and she can meet with you one-on-one. We can FaceTime you, but we have really great educational materials because we really want to be your partner through this process, not just here's some injections, good luck with them, but we want to be your partner to help you navigate through this process. So we really hold your hand through the whole way. But in short, it's about 10 days of injections. Those injections are helping your eggs mature. And then eventually we lead to the final days where we would then retrieve your eggs. So in this calendar, and I know it's a little bit hard to see, so close to your screen, you can see that the injections are about 10 days. And then where it says tentative egg retrieval is when your eggs would be retrieved. And why does it say tentative egg retrieval? Because every woman would be unique. Every woman would respond a little bit differently. So let's say you and your best friend both started on a Friday for this, with this example. One of you might be retrieved on Monday, the other might be retrieved on Thursday. But take home is that the entire process never takes more than 2 weeks. And where that stop sign is when you would stop your birth control. So you don't have to stop your birth control for months on end. You literally are only going to be off your birth control for 1 month. And if you have an IUD, you would keep your IUD through this whole process. And we can actually retrieve your eggs and do the whole egg freezing process with your IUD in place. So when I say stop birth control, I'm just talking about NuvaRing, or if you're on the shot, or if you have an implant or the pill. But IUDs can stay in place during the whole time. And then what is the egg retrieval? The actual retrieval is a 10 to 15 minute procedure. It is not a surgery. There's no stitches, no band-aids, no cuts, no knives. It's just a 10 to 15 minute procedure. It's done through a very small needle that's inserted through the vagina, really not invasive. And that's how the eggs are extracted. And then once they're extracted, they're given to an embryologist who looks at them under the microscope and would then subsequently freeze them for you to use in the future. So we talk about egg freezing, just briefly. A lot of women will ask, well, I've heard embryo freezing is better than egg freezing. What's the whole situation? Bottom line is if you don't have a partner or you aren't ready to commit to a donor sperm, then we're going to be freezing eggs. Why is that? Because once we fertilize an egg, we can't unfertilize it. So in women who are single, or let's say you're in a relationship where you're not quite sure if this is going to be the future father of your children, we would be freezing eggs because our goal is to preserve your fertility so that you can then use those eggs when you're ready. But you might be in a committed relationship. You think this is definitely going to be the future father of my children. In that case, then embryo freezing could be an option. The key is, am I ready to commit to the sperm? The bottom line is with our current technology in 2020, and actually really over the last 10 years, egg and embryo freezing are really considered equivalent. So if I take eggs out of your body in May of 2020, whether I fertilize them today or I fertilize them in 10 years, their outcome is going to be the same. And that's because of really amazing advances that have occurred in egg freezing that allow us to be able to freeze and thaw eggs to perfection, to the same level of skill and quality as freezing and thawing embryos. So sometimes if you're a big Googler, if you Google this information, you'll find a lot of old literature. The key is old literature that shows that embryo freezing is there. But our recent technologies have really made these two technologies equivalent. So what comes next? Whether you have eggs or you have embryos.
Mommy.
Oh my goodness.
Mommy.
This is my daughter. I apologize.
Mommy.
Penny, go with Daddy.
Mommy, I just said something. Where are the water balloons? I have to tell you something.
They're over there. I'm so sorry.
Okay, come on.
So sorry. Being home, I apologize. That is my 3-year-old making her official cameo. I apologize. So whether you have eggs or embryos, they would be stored in our facility. And our hope is, and my personal hope for any woman who freezes eggs or embryos, is you freeze your eggs and embryos and you never need to use them. And what do I mean by that? I hope you freeze your eggs and embryos as a proactive preventative measure, and you end up meeting the right person or reaching the right moment in your life, and you end up being able to get pregnant on your own for free through sex at home. But if that's not what the reality is for you, or that's not what your future holds, then you can come back and we can thaw those eggs or embryos. If it's eggs, we would then thaw the eggs, fertilize them with sperm, create an embryo, genetically test that embryo, make sure it's normal, and then we would implant that embryo back in your uterus to grow, which would be the completion of what's called IVF. But the key is your eggs are stored safely for either 1 year or 10 years. Let's say you move to a different city, state, or country, you can always have your eggs transferred from one facility to another fertility center. So there's a lot of options. What is IVF? So I just mentioned it briefly, but IVF is just a process of taking an egg and creating an embryo. So it's taking an egg, whether you are going through, let's say your desire is to be pregnant today, then we would extract your eggs, and the same day we would fertilize it with sperm donor, your partner, your boyfriend, doesn't matter, sperm, create an embryo, and then we would genetically test the embryo and implant it back in your uterus. But with egg freezing, you say, I'm not ready to be pregnant today. I want to be pregnant in the future. Then we'll fertilize the eggs in the future. So the only difference between egg freezing and IVF is the time of which you wish to be pregnant and the time with which we fertilize those eggs. So what does it mean to be infertile? You know, we just talked about fertility for the last few minutes. And infertility has actual definitions. So if you are under the age of 35, infertility means that you have been actively trying to get pregnant, meaning you've had unprotected sex, and you have not gotten pregnant. If you're over 35, it means you've been having unprotected sex for 6 months and you have not gotten pregnant. The sad reality is 1 out of 8 couples, regardless of their age, will experience infertility. And 1 out of 3 couples, infertility issues will actually be related to problems with the man. And so I'll take a moment to say we've been spending this whole talk about women's health, and obviously it's Women's Health Week, but so important for us to encourage our partners, our male partners, to have semen analyses and get checked out. Because a man could have issues with his sperm and he would have no symptoms. So really important, and so easy for men to get tested. It's just a semen analysis. They ejaculate into a cup and their sperm is evaluated. Doesn't require any blood work, doesn't require anything invasive. And so I really encourage any couple, if you're thinking about having kids now or in the future, to have the woman checked, but also to do a semen analysis for a man. And that's something we can do in our office for you very easily. But I just, you know, with these definitions of infertility, though, the most important take home is to be proactive. Like, don't wait until you've been trying for a year to find out that you could have found out 12 months ago that your partner's sperm count is low, or that your tubes are blocked, or that your egg count was low. That's where time becomes so important. And our current fertility knowledge, or our current fertility structure in our current healthcare system teaches us that, well, wait, you're young, don't worry about it. You know, try for a year, and then if you don't get pregnant, come back and I'll send you to a specialist. And our mission at Kindbody is to empower every couple, every woman with that information before they start trying, so that you don't end up wasting a year and we can diagnose your issues right off the bat. Or you can find out you're perfectly healthy and you can go into the process or journey of getting pregnant with peace of mind. So the end of the story is we have options. Maybe you're just not having sex during the right time of the month, and that's your whole issue, and we can help you understand your ovulation better, and you have sex at the right time and you're pregnant. I hope it's that easy. Maybe there's some issues with sperm, and doing an intrauterine insemination where we inject the sperm into the uterus will help you conceive. Or maybe we really do have some strong fertility issues. Your egg counts are low, his sperm counts are low, your tubes are blocked. You have an issue with your ovarian reserve, and IVF is the answer. Or maybe you really have reached a point where your egg counts are extremely low. You're one of those 1 out of 10 women who's under 35 who has low egg count, or you are in your 40s, and an egg donor is going to be a good option. Or you're a same-sex couple and you need sperm, and so helping you find a sperm donor. Or you are a same-sex male couple and we need a gestational carrier and an egg donor to help you get pregnant. So regardless of where you are in the journey and what your special factors might be, we can help you explore those options and navigate what can often be scary and simplify it. So your next steps, whether you're actively trying to get pregnant or desperately trying to not get pregnant, I encourage you to at least take a few moments and learn as much as you can about your body and learn about your fertility health, learn about your egg count so that you can make objective, factual decisions with options. And at Kindbody, we're here to be your partner in that journey. So no discussion about medical health in the United States would be complete without talking about costs. And one of the things I'm really proud of at Kindbody is that we really are passionate about lowering those costs. So for a well woman or preconception appointment or just a regular checkup, it's going to be covered by your regular insurance. In the event that you don't have insurance, if you use the discount code OBGYN FAX, again, that's OBGYN FAX, which is right on the screen in yellow, will give you discounts to help you with that expense. Fertility assessments are also generally covered by your general health insurance. Even if you don't have fertility benefits, the assessment can be covered. And again, if you don't have insurance, we can get you discounts with OBGYN FAX as the discount code. If you do come and see us and then later decide you want to freeze your eggs and you sign up with OBGYN FAX, even if it's a couple months from now, we'll give you a discount up to $1,000 off for egg freezing and $1,000 off of IVF if you end up needing it. Again, making an appointment with us doesn't mean you're committing to egg freezing or you're committing to IVF. You literally could just be coming for your well woman checkup. But we do know that this can be expensive, and so we want to make it more accessible by providing these discounts. You guys will be receiving an email from our team tomorrow with this information, but if you just want to jot it down, our website is just kindbody.com, and the discount code is OBGYN FAX, all one word. And if you make your first appointment online using that discount code, it'll save your code so that then in the future, if you do any follow-up treatments with us, these discounts will be applied. We do accept all the major insurances. And you can use your FSA or HSA accounts to pay for any copays that you may have. And you know, we know that when it comes to healthcare, people often have so many questions. We will be your friend and an assistant through that journey. So let us know if you have questions about your benefits, your deductibles. We're happy to help you understand all of that better. So that's it. I hope that was informative. I'm going to open up the floor to questions. And again, thank you for your time this evening.
Amazing. Thank you. This chat has been really exciting. So we're going to ask some of the questions you've all been having to Dr. Sasan now. The first one is about birth control. So there's been some confusion and questions about oral birth control pills. Can you speak more to how those pills work and what the side effects are?
First of all, I want to apologize. When I started my talk, it was like daylight, and I just realized I gave you guys like a talk in the dark. So I apologize that it was so dark. I hope you could still see me. Rebecca, I apologize. Can you repeat your question?
Oh, yes, no problem. And you look great in the light, so it's fine.
Oh, okay, good.
So there's been a lot of questions about oral birth control pills. Can you briefly explain how oral birth control pills work and what the side effects are?
Sure. So oral birth control pills prevent us from ovulating. So naturally what happens is a group of eggs gets released each month, and then our brain sends a signal to those eggs to help one egg fully mature. So birth control pills prevent the signal from the brain getting to the egg, so it prevents that one egg from maturing, hence preventing ovulation. So if there's no mature egg, you could have sex every day and you wouldn't get pregnant. The key to understanding, though, is being on birth control just prevents pregnancy while you take the pill. That's why all of us know someone who got pregnant when they were taking the pill, and usually it's, oh, I forgot to take my pill correctly, or I wasn't taking it correctly that month. So the take-home message with birth control is being on birth control does not harm your lifelong fertility. It doesn't make you less fertile because you've been taking it. But what it will do is prevent you from getting pregnant while you're on it.
Great. Just a few more questions about birth control. When you are trying to get pregnant, how long before should you stop taking birth control pills, or does it vary by person?
Now, as a general rule of thumb, I tell my patients to stop their birth control if you got pregnant tomorrow, you would be okay with it. It's a really big misconception that you need to wean off birth control, or you need to have some washout period and all this stuff, and that's really just not the case. The whole reason why birth control pills have to be taken every day is because when you stop taking them, even for a day, you could potentially get pregnant. So as a rule of thumb, you should stop your birth control when you are actively ready to conceive. Now, with that said, you may stop your birth control and it may take you 6 months to get pregnant, but birth control is only effective while you're taking it. So you should stop it the month where if you got pregnant the next month, you would be happy with that.
Thank you. And how far in advance before getting pregnant should you come in for these preconception visits and tests?
I would say 6 months is a good time. If you come too early, obviously things can change. And if you come too close, we may not have enough time to be able to impact change. So I think 6 months is a nice sweet spot. Obviously, if you come a little earlier, that's okay. You come a little later, it's okay. But I would say the sweet spot is about 6 months before you plan on starting to try. Because that way, let's say we find out you're a little anemic, or your vitamin levels that are off, or we find a problem, we have time to fix it, and we're not delaying when you want to be pregnant. So it's a nice, good point. So 6 months, I think, would be a great time to come in if you plan on getting pregnant soon.
Thank you. Okay, and then we have a bunch of questions about age. We have a question from someone who is 39 years old, hasn't started trying to get pregnant yet, is wondering realistically what the odds would be of success without coming in for help.
So 39 years old, and you're just wondering how likely is it that I could get pregnant? I don't know. I really wouldn't know until I met you. Not everybody, our bodies don't read the book, and so not everyone's going to be the same. And that's why, one of the big points that I just stressed in this talk is that you're never too young or too old to learn more about the facts of your body. So I would encourage that 39-year-old to come in. Let's check your egg count. Let's check your hormones. Let's learn your facts. And then I can tell you honestly and realistically, here's your options. Here's how likely it is that you could conceive naturally, or, your only options are through fertility treatments. And don't be scared to come in, because it's not always going to be, bad news. And even if it is not so great news, the sooner you find out, the more opportunities we'll have for change. So the answer to that question is really, until we do the assessment and do the ultrasound of the blood work, there's no way to know.
Thanks. And we have a couple questions about, so losing eggs. You talked about losing eggs every month, 1,000 a month. When do you run out of those eggs? At what age are there no more eggs typically?
Yeah, it varies. So I mentioned 1 out of 10 women, unfortunately, will reach a point where they have run out of eggs under the age of 35. Majority of women will reach that age between 35 and 40. You know, occasionally, and all of us know Aunt so-and-so who had a kid when she was 40-something, so occasionally you have women who remain fertile into their early 40s. But the take-home message is don't just assume that you're fertile because you're young, and don't just assume that you're not fertile because you're older. And there's no way to know just looking at someone or going over someone's medical history. We've got to do the ultrasound. We've got to do the blood work to know your options.
Thanks. And can you speak a bit more to how often you have to do these tests? So if you did an assessment, 1 year, do you have to come again every 6 months or a year?
Depends on how old you are. So I would say if you are in your 20s and early 30s and your numbers were good, then once a year is plenty. If you are in your mid 30s to late 30s and you're then I would say 6 months is good. But if you found out that your egg counts are low and your ovarian reserve is low, then sometimes we see a decline even as little as 3 months. So factors that become important is how old you are and what your fertility is. And then I can tell you, okay, based on your age and your fertility, 1 year, you're safe, or is it 3 months, or is it 6 months? So it's really going to depend on how old you are and what your fertility baseline is as to how frequently we need to test. It's not one size fits all.
Thank you. We also have a bunch of questions about miscarriages. Can you speak to how common miscarriages are, and if you've had one, does that decrease your chances of being able to maintain a pregnancy the next time?
Yeah. Miscarriages are extremely common. Up to 40% of all pregnancies in all comers, I'm talking about even women in their 20s, but up to 40% of all pregnancies end in miscarriage. I would say this is probably one of the biggest disservices that we as women do to each other, is that we don't talk about our miscarriages, and as a result, every woman thinks she's the only one. And the reality is that it's extremely common. Many times miscarriages can occur due to the quality of the egg. So women over 35 at a higher risk of miscarriage. The most common reason why miscarriages occur is because of a genetically abnormal embryo, meaning that embryo wasn't destined to be a normal child anyway, and that's why the body naturally miscarries. But sometimes miscarriages can be for other reasons. This should be a thorough discussion you have with your doctor based on your age and the nature of the miscarriage and how many weeks you were when it occurred. Having one miscarriage oftentimes doesn't mean that it'll occur again, but anyone who's had 2 or more miscarriages should have a proper evaluation and workup, and those are something that we would go over with you one-on-one.
Thank you. We also have a lot of questions about PCOS. What are some indicators of having PCOS, and how does PCOS affect your fertility?
So PCOS stands for polycystic ovarian syndrome. If I had one nerdy medical wish, is I would change the name because the name is really misleading. Women think that if they have polycystic ovarian syndrome, that means they have a lot of cysts, and that's not the case. PCOS is a condition that is very broad in presentation. So there are some women that can have very mild PCOS and get pregnant very easily, and they get their periods every month, and they wouldn't even know they had it unless someone did some blood work on them and happened to incidentally find that they had it. And then there's some women who can have really extreme PCOS where they don't get their periods at all, or they have extreme difficulty conceiving. And so it's a really broad spectrum disease. The take-home issue for some women is that they're just not ovulating correctly, meaning that their brain is not talking to their ovaries in a regular cycle, so that instead of releasing an egg every month, they're releasing an egg every 3 months, or they're releasing an egg every 6 weeks. And if you're not releasing an egg every month, it's going to make it harder to get pregnant. My take-home message for PCOS is if someone has told you you had it when you were 12 years old, don't necessarily assume you still have it. ask a lot of questions, make sure you have a thorough evaluation, recognize that just because you had PCOS before doesn't necessarily mean you'll have it for a lifetime. It is something that you can actually grow out of, for lack of a better word. And just because you have it doesn't mean you'll have all the fertility issues. And it's something that we can definitely help you with fertility treatments conceive. So having that diagnosis does not mean you can't have children.
Okay. We also have a lot of questions about AMH scores. What do you consider a low AMH score, and what is a high AMH score, and what exactly does that mean?
Sure. AMH stands for anti-Mullerian hormone. It's the hormone I was telling you about that gives us an estimation of your ovarian reserve. Best way to think of AMH is kind of like finding out how much gas you have left in your car, because we're born with all the eggs we'll ever have. So it kind of gives us a gauge, how many eggs do I have left. An AMH level of less than 1 is considered low. Doesn't mean you can't have kids, just means your likelihood of conceiving naturally is lower. An AMH level between 1 and 6 is considered normal. It's a pretty big range, but you have to think about that would be all comers. 6 is a higher number, 1 is the lower number, but anything between 1 and 6 would be considered normal. And then in women who have AMH scores higher than 6, it can be, and I stress can, not always, can be an indication of PCOS, which means that you have a hormonal imbalance that we just talked about.
Thank you. Now I'll ask you some of the questions you've been getting about egg freezing. The first is there any downside to egg freezing during the pandemic? And what are you recommending now?
Absolutely. So very quickly in this process, the American Society for Reproductive Medicine and, here in New York, our governor, as well as across the country, the people realized that fertility is time dependent, fertility is age dependent, and fertility isn't going to stop because there's a pandemic going on. And so it really became essential across the country very quickly. And we don't have any evidence to show that that the COVID-19 or any virus, actually, for that matter, old or new, impacts our eggs. Because remember, our eggs we're born with, and so it's different if someone is planning a pregnancy versus egg freezing. But we know of no harms for egg freezing or going through fertility treatments during this time. And so we, obviously talk to patients on one-on-one so they fully understand what we know, what we don't know. But as of right now, our really extensive information that we have shows that there is no harm in proceeding with fertility treatments, as long as you're in a center like ours where we're really taking extreme precautions to protect our patients and protect our providers.
Thank you. Some more questions about egg freezing. Do you have to remove an IUD for an egg freezing cycle?
Yeah, so as I mentioned during the talk, your IUD would stay in place, and that's regardless of the type of IUD that you have. We do not need to remove it for the assessment nor for the actual egg freezing process.
And does KindBody help with the injections in person or by video? Do you have people available at night to help with the injections?
Yeah, so the injections, as I mentioned during my talk, are probably the scariest portion of this entire process. We understand that. So we have really greatly curated videos that you can watch from the comfort of your home. We do very thorough teachings with you in advance. We really set you up for success. But then we are also available through FaceTime and Zoom meetings while you're giving yourself your injections, even if it's every night, to make sure that you feel comfortable. And I will say that even our patients that I've had who are complete needle phobic patients have overcome this, and after they give themselves their first injection, they're like, oh my God, I'm a new woman. They feel empowered. And so it is definitely something that we set you up with success. We walk you through every step of the way. And on a case-by-case basis, if it's absolutely just no way that you can possibly fathom doing it, we could even teach someone to, someone who lives with you or a friend or family, to do it for you. And then in select cases, we can also accommodate you by having a nurse come to your home. But I will tell you, in all the years that I've done this, 99% of women even if they start off being petrified of it, will learn how to do it and are effectively able to do it themselves. And remember, it's just for 10 days, and they're teeny tiny injections. They go just under the skin. It's nothing like a vaccine or a Depo-Provera shot or anything like that. They're teeny tiny little incisions. You can't mess it up.
Thank you. For freezing eggs, what is the maximum number of years eggs can be frozen?
Yeah, so there is no maximum. You know, theoretically, your eggs could be frozen for 100 years. So regardless of how old you are, your eggs could survive being frozen long after you are old and gray. So that should never be a factor when you think about it. There's no shelf life. So whether an egg is frozen for a day or for 100 years, they're going to be just as good as the day they were frozen. So that does not need to impact your decisions. The reality is the younger you are, the better the quality of your eggs are going to be. So that should be the key factor.
Thank you. And what is the cost for storing the eggs?
The cost for storing the eggs at Kindbody is $600 a year, starting the second year. So the first year would be included in that for you guys as a special tonight, the $5,500. The first year of egg storage is included in that price. And then starting year 2, it's $600 a year. And you are the master of the domain. You want to keep them frozen until you're 50, great. You only want to freeze them until you're 40, fine. So however many years that ends up being, you're the boss.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll wrap soon. Just a few more questions. I just wanted to go back to something you said about miscarriages. You said that about 40% of pregnancies end in miscarriage. Someone asked that the number they've seen varies really dramatically, and they've seen as low as 10% or 8%. What's the reason for those differences?
Yeah, so one of the correlations with miscarriages is that it's the most common, the most likely, or 90% of genetic abnormalities are due to the age of the woman. So if you're looking at really well done studies where they show those ranges that this person who asked this question is eloquently talking about, they're then taking age into consideration. So the younger you are, the less likely you would have a miscarriage, even though they do occur. The older you are, so past 35, the chance of miscarriage increases, and that's directly linked to the age of the egg, which is the age of you. That's where egg freezing can become helpful, because let's say you freeze your eggs when you're 30, you could become pregnant when you're 40 with your 30-year-old egg, and now your pregnancy is 30-year-old with a 30-year-old egg, which then reduces your chance of miscarriage and allows you to potentially have a much healthier pregnancy. So that's the take home there, is you can kind of cheat time by freezing your eggs.
Cool, thank you. So I think we're gonna wrap it up, but I would love for you to share any final thoughts or words of wisdom with this wonderful group we have here tonight.
Yeah, I think my take home is, I know that this topic is scary. I know that this topic is often only talked about behind closed doors, and unfortunately we don't even talk to our own sisters or moms or best friends about it oftentimes. But whether you're someone who's put off having a pap smear for several years because you're afraid of speculums, or you're someone who just you're worried, what if I go and get a fertility assessment, I find out my egg count is low, wherever you are kind of in your life's journey, I would just encourage you to come and see us, and let's be partners in the journey together, whether it's getting over the fear of getting a pap smear or just learning more about your body. That information can really be empowering. And I think the more we as women talk about this, and next time you're sitting with your group of friends over Zoom, talk about this topic and bring it up. And I think, you just have to be the person who starts the sentence, and you'll find someone else who, oh yeah, I had a miscarriage, or oh yeah, I've been worried about my fertility too, or oh yeah, I've been thinking about my birth control, or I have spotting as well, or I hate my IUD, or whatever the case may be. We all have a lot more in common with each other than I think we realize. And thanks for having me.
Thank you. If you have any other questions, you can always email our team, navigator@kindbody.com, and we'll be sending an email tomorrow with the video recording, the slides, and that code we gave tonight, which is OBGYN fax, and we'll email that to you tomorrow too. So thank you all for your time. It's been wonderful.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night. Stay healthy and safe.